I don't care what you think, I don't care what you feel, I don't care what you understand. You are going to freak out. It was just as exciting and as unwholesome and as dangerous and as horrible and transgressive as that. You felt like you were just getting jabbed with something sheer kind of narcosis. So I had no idea. When I first saw Pulp Fiction, I thought, wow, John Travolta has ended this movie alive and dead at the same time. I really didn't like Inglourious Basterds. Everybody in the world loves that film. But I sit there in the audience and he will say, hey, remember those 60s Hong Kong Kung Fu movies? Do you remember those? Yeah. And the difference is, he really does know them. He really knows about them all. He enfolds you in this weird conspiratorial embrace of the marginal, the dispossessed world of pop culture, which never was admitted into the mainstream before Tarantino. In fact, he's put us Brits to shame with what he knew about our cinema, which we didn't care until he told us to care about it, and now we do care about it. Highbrow answer to that question, incidentally, at the sophisticated dinner tables in London is Jackie Brown. I'll tell you this, if somebody says to you Jackie Brown, sure, but he's not. If somebody says Jackie Brown, it means they're not a real Quentin Tarantino fan. It's like, I don't know, it's like saying you're a Beatles fan and your favorite track is When I'm 64. I don't believe for a moment Bruce Lee could have got defeated by somebody almost 25 years his senior, however much of a tough guy he was. No way would Bruce Lee go down to Brad Pitt.
Hello friends, welcome to another episode of Filmcopan. Today we have a very special guest on our channel, someone who has carved our learnings of cinema across decades through his writings, reviews and precise analysis of movies. We have the pleasure of having Mr. Peter Bradshaw, the chief film critic at The Guardian UK, joining us today. Hello Peter, welcome to Filmcopan.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you. I feel old. I always people say, what do you mean decades? I've only been doing it for 5 minutes. What
Okay. Yeah, so someone who has carved out learnings of cinema across 5 minutes through his writing, reviews, and precise analysis of movies. That's better, I guess.
That's better.
So yeah, we are very excited to have this opportunity to discuss cinema with you in person, and we're really glad that you could join us at this short notice. So we are going to talk about Quentin Tarantino today, Hollywood director, screenwriter, producer, and actor we have adored for a long time. Tarantino's cinema is characterized by non-linear storylines, humor, violence, aesthetics, dialogues, ensemble casts, soundtracks. He has won 2 Academy Awards, 2 BAFTA Awards, 4 Golden Globe, and a Palme d'Or. So I think Tarantino is possibly also one of the most well-known filmmakers, international filmmakers in India. I don't think anybody else could have such a cult following. So let me come to you, Peter. Tell us, what do you consider the most standout aspect in Quentin's filmmaking, and what attracts you the most in it?
Well, it's a very good question. I've had a kind of tempestuous relationship with I've only met him once or twice, very, very briefly. I mean, a tempestuous relationship in a way as a fan of his work. I mean, encountering his first 2 movies, Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, for the first time when I was a young student back in the day, were amazing experiences in my life because of the sheer the blitzkrieg of sensory emotion that kind of blew me away when I was in the audience for his movies. The nearest thing I can describe it is a phrase I used when I wrote about Kill Bill, the Kill Bill movies. When I was reminded when I was a kid, we heard rumors that in New York, drug dealers were this is in the 1970s, were prowling the aisles and the streets of movie theaters in New York, injecting heroin into people's arms to get them hooked on heroin. And I thought, that to me was what it was like being in the cinema for a Tarantino film. It was just as exciting and as unwholesome and as dangerous and as horrible and transgressive as that. You felt like you were just getting jabbed with some sheer kind of narcosis, something that went beyond your ideas of, well, here's a story and here are the characters and I'm going to make an investment in them, and what's going to happen in the end? Wow, I'm really sympathetic to the sympathetic hero or heroine. Wow, I hope they surmount their obstacles and get where they want to go in the end, which is the traditional way you consume a Hollywood movie. Whereas with Tarantino, you felt like you were having a kind of massive vial of heroin jabbed in your arm, thinking, I don't care what you think, I don't care what you feel, I don't care what you understand. You are going to freak out at what we are going to show you now. And I duly freaked out. I had no idea. When I first saw Pulp Fiction, I thought, wow, John Travolta has ended this movie alive and dead at the same time. And yet, if that was some sort of trendy dramatist doing that, I would think, well, that's interesting, but I'm not excited by it. But on a sort of cerebral level, I think that's quite interesting. When Quentin Tarantino did it in Pulp Fiction, it was the most mind-blowingly exciting thing I'd ever experienced in my life. And I couldn't for the life of me tell you why, but somehow it was exciting. And I suppose the hypodermic needle image, what I'm telling you, is of course derived from the adrenaline scene in Pulp Fiction, I suppose. I've only just realized that. But I mean, having said that, I've sometimes reacted against Tarantino films. I think because, like a spurned lover, I sometimes feel like, the great man is not taking me seriously, or he's not, I don't know why. I have some fantastically strong, bizarre anti-Quentin Tarantino, anti-Tarantino responses sometimes. For example, I really didn't like Inglourious Basterds. Everybody in the world loves that film, but not me. I didn't really like it. But because I didn't like it, I felt, well, I had to really not like it, because that's the only way you deal with a Quentin Tarantino film. You have to turn the dial all the way up or all the way down. So I did. And I still think it's not quite as exciting as his other films. But
we were going to come to that later. But since you have brought it up, let's talk about Inglourious Basterds, because I quite like it, to be very honest with you, Peter. Yeah. And I say that with some fear now.
Yeah. No, you say what you like. I'm probably wrong.
Yeah, but you got to tell us that what is it about Inglourious Basterds that perturbed you so much that you didn't like it?
Well, I mean, there are lots of great things about it. I mean, it was the movie that introduced me to Mélanie Laurent, the French actress who I thought was so great. I just watched her recently in another movie called Oxygen, which is on Netflix. It's not a fantastic movie, but she's very good. And she was a wonderful pick for Tarantino, because she was a little bit like Uma Thurman in that she had this very angular, interesting, sharp, very shrewd address to the camera. She wasn't just this sort of demure kind of heroine. She looked like a kind of a killer from the word go. And of course, it was the movie that introduced us all to Christoph Waltz, who is this amazing European actor who was fluent in about 10 languages and sort of just as formidable and just as sinister in all of them. I don't know. I'm still not sure about the Hitler stuff at the end of Inglourious Basterds. I feel that it's being a bit kind of shallow on the subject of Hitler and anti-Semitism. And for me, it didn't quite work. I kind of like I like the kind of pulp war movie, Hitler sort of Nazi vampire killer sort of stuff. I think was more, I saw them more palatable, more interesting in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the Leonardo DiCaprio character in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But there's lots of interesting stuff in Inglourious Basterds, and particularly Brad Pitt is really good in it. I mean, he's one of these actors who is you don't see him very often in films that aren't by Quentin Tarantino, obviously, but he's got such style and such self-possession. He's kind of like Gary Cooper used to be, I think, in the old Hollywood.
Digressing a little bit, the problems you had with Inglourious Basterds, did you have similar problems with Jojo Rabbit? If I ask you that?
Yes, I did, but 1,000 times more with Jojo Rabbit. See, I mean, I could forgive Inglourious Basterds because it was a black comedy, and it was there to be provocative and stylish, and it's there to be incorrect and to upend the apple cart and smash the crockery of my typical guardian liberal fastidious beliefs. Whereas Jojo Rabbit wound me up because it seemed to be so historically illiterate. It enraged me. But there are lots of people, I don't know what you guys think, but there are lots of very clever people who think it's absolutely brilliant, think it's absolutely marvelous. For me, it's tin-eared. It doesn't understand what it's saying. It's as if this kid, this adorable little kid, who's absolutely adorable, he has two imaginary best friends. One is Adolf, and the other is a kind of sub-Anne Frank figure. And you just think, guys, do you understand how misjudged that is? But perhaps it's just me. But because, as I say, some very clever people in the UK, anyway, think that it's terrifically good. But it makes me break out in hives.
I think we also had similar problems with Jojo Rabbit, because I remember me and Arup discussing it over the phone that really when you're doing something like that, aren't you like literally taking such a serious issue and making it literally very cheap? That's what I felt.
I think so. At least when Tarantino does it, it's supposed to be outrageous. It's supposed to be challenging. Whereas Jojo Rabbit, I think they think that it's very lovely and very life affirming and very wonderful. That's what annoys me about it.
Acha, let me come to Arup now. Arup, why do you like Tarantino? As simple as that.
You know, the way Peter explained, I will not be able to do that kind of a justice. But I think I love Tarantino as a screenwriter more than a director. I think, you know, the way you will always find his films, you know, kind of split into chapters. It feels like reading a novel. And, you know, like listening to a music. So it's not that, you know, before a conflict, after a conflict, and you have the whole movie. It's like in his films, like Pulp Fiction is a very nice example. After you feel that everything has finished, it will still go for that high. And then it will come for a low. It feels like a ringmaster. He is always in control of the audience, telling when they will laugh, when they will cry, when they will be outrageous, and when they will be, you know, kind of stable for a moment, and then he will make them be cool and peaceful for some time, and then suddenly will have them, you know, stand up again. So the control he kind of puts on his audience, that's extraordinary. And after you have all done that, you will feel, okay, it was such a simple storyline. It was not a lot of things, but I feel, you know, the reason we go to the cinemas, the reason we, you know, think, you know, it's cinematic. It's not only about listening to a story, but the way that story, you know, grabs you. That is what Tarantino gets for you.
That's very
I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. For me, it's all that. Of course, it's all that. But also the amazing thing is that he, more than I think than any filmmaker or any critic, any cinephile, he has this almost supernatural knowledge of popular culture, which he brings to every movie. I mean, it's amazing. And he persuades you that you remember it too. I sit there in the audience and he will say, hey, remember those 60s Hong Kong Kung Fu movies? Do you remember those? Yeah. And the difference is he really does know them. He really knows about them all. He's like a kind of savant genius. He knows, he can remember, he could recite them for you. He knows all about them. And you sit there and he creates this sort of optical illusion. And after a while you think, yeah, I remember those. I remember sitting in the audience at wherever it was, the New Beverly Cinema or wherever it was, and yeah, I remember watching this. Of course, I haven't, but I'm fascinated to see it. And he makes you think that you know all about it as well. And he enfolds you in this weird conspiratorial embrace of the marginal, the dispossessed world of pop culture, which never was admitted into the mainstream before Tarantino came along. At least I don't think so. Nobody talked about it. You know, when he arrived, we were just about in Kill Bill when Uma Thurman is dressed like Bruce Lee in A Game of Death. But that was the tip of the iceberg. It was the tip of the iceberg of what he knew, and also music. pop music. He is like a kind of supernatural, otherworldly being melded with Spotify. He knows everything about what music you need for any particular scene. It's amazing what he knows. And as I say, I've met him very few times, and he would talk about things. And it's amazing what he knows. He has it in common with Scorsese. Martin Scorsese is like this as well. Scorsese is an amazing historian of cinema. And he's a particularly amazing historian of British cinema, actually. In fact, he's put us Brits to shame with what he knew about our cinema, which we didn't care until he told us to care about it, and now we do care about it. But his cinema is kind of much more highbrow and classic Hollywood studio cinema. And he's, of course, Scorsese is a master and a genius at understanding that and keeping that tradition alive. And also world cinema, whereas Tarantino does that as well. But he's brilliant at retrieving the pulp, the unconsidered and forgotten world of cinema, and retrieving it and bringing it back into the mainstream, which he did almost single-handedly. And it's amazing. As I say, he creates it, he feeds it all into his movies, and then he persuades you that you remember it as well. As I say, I've come out of Tarantino movies and thinking, yeah, I remember those movies. And you think, no, you don't, but you think you do, because he is like this savant. It's like a seance of every single grindhouse movie that he's ever seen. He pours onto the screen.
Right. Arnav, coming to you now, why do you find Tarantino engaging, or why do you like so much?
Yeah, I think look, I should continue from where both of them are left behind, and I don't think I have much more to add to that. But yeah, but Peter was saying that this Tarantino has so much knowledge about everything, and that helps in what way. Let's say if I am asked to write something about UK or America, let's say, I'll read about the books, I'll watch the movies, and kind of interpret that in my own way, and will reflect that when I'm writing. But Tarantino, who has a great knowledge of everything from the ground reality, the way he writes, and that's where he stand apart from the other director, is that makes the character so believable. Now he can bring up he has this weird ability to take seemingly generic type of conversation and throw them into his films. They are not hyperbole. Yeah. And it makes them so believable, raw. And someone like me, who is not a fan of Varva's films, still like that. So that's something fascinates me a lot. And also, obviously, as a storyteller, like the way he makes non-linear films, the flow of it, so interestingly well connected and merged. And something which makes me always fascinated about Tarantino is the genre blending, from Kill Bill to Inglorious Bastard, if I may say so. Django Unchained, the way he has blended different genre, it's really fascinates me, and the music and the pop culture reference, of course.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, it's interesting you talk about Django. I love Django Unchained. Django Unchained, again, it is another example of a movie that brought into the mainstream, if only briefly, a kind of a forbidden type of film, really, which was the kind of film about the slavery era, which, again, before Django Unchained, there were very few films about slavery. It was one of the great forbidden subjects in Hollywood. Since then, there have been 12 Years a Slave, but even now, it's not a very well known genre in Hollywood. And in a way, it took Tarantino, with his amazing tactlessness, not merely to direct a movie about a slave, but to allude not to any very high-minded genre, but to a particularly despised genre like the Mandingo genre, which is a kind of black man as the subject of sexual fascination, which is precisely the kind of genre which is loathed and despised and detested by enlightened liberal opinion, because it appears to be racist. Whereas only Tarantino could have got away with not merely doing that, but casting Samuel L. Jackson as the Uncle Tom figure. I mean, it was beyond offensive. It was something which kind of blew the lid off everything. But because in a way, we're so used to it from Quentin Tarantino, if it came from anybody else, there would be much more of a row. But because it was Tarantino, people in a way are kind of used to it. But from anybody else, I mean, we would still be arguing about it now if it came from any other director. Certainly any other white director, it would be intolerable. I mean, he would have been cancelled years ago. But because it was Tarantino, we've kind of got used to it. He's, in the most remarkable way, he's become a sort of sui generis figure who kind of does what he wants. I mean, sometimes his movies are successful, sometimes less successful. I always suspect that they are less successful than he wants them to be in box office terms. But it's amazing what he is. As I say, it's amazing the knowledge that he brings to it. His absolute. I mean, people talk about being encyclopedic in their knowledge of music or pop culture. Sure, but they're not in Quentin Tarantino's league. As I say, he's like somebody from another planet. It's amazing.
Peter, a difficult question for you now. What is your favorite Tarantino film?
Oh my goodness, I really don't know. I love Pulp Fiction. I love Django. I love both Kill Bills. The kind of the highbrow answer to that question, incidentally, at the sophisticated dinner tables in London is Jackie Brown. Everybody says the same thing. Every asshole says the same thing. Oh, Jackie Brown. Oh yeah, Jackie Brown. So much better than any of his other films. I mean, sure, I like Jackie Brown. I like Jackie Brown as much as anybody else. But I'll tell you this: if somebody says to you Jackie Brown, sure, but he's not. If somebody says Jackie Brown, it means they're not a real Quentin Tarantino fan. They're not.
Exactly.
I mean, I love Jackie. I mean, Jackie Brown is great, but it's the answer to people who, in their hearts, think, "Oh, it's too ghastly and violent and horrible." Blah, blah, blah. Jackie Brown is classy. It's based on a book that I've sort of heard of, but not really read. Yeah, that's fine. That's fair enough. Having said that, I don't know why I'm slagging off, because there's some great stuff about Jackie Brown as well. So that's great as well. But it irritates me, the conversation around Jackie Brown. As I say, that's Peter Bradshaw's iron rule. If somebody says their favorite Tarantino film is Jackie Brown, that's their way of saying they don't like Tarantino at all. They probably don't even like Jackie Brown that much. But,
right.
But I mean, I love the dialogue, the early Roger Avery dialogue that he had going on in his early movies. He doesn't do that quite so much now. He doesn't do straight up dialogue scenes quite as much as he used to do. I mean, there's some great dialogue in his later books, but the Avery dialogue in Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction is, of course, sort of amazing. It was part of the reason why we sort of loved him, because we kind of couldn't believe that there was a movie director who is going to stop everything, bring the action to an absolute halt, while they just talked about nothing at all. The nearest thing we have to it is now Jerry Seinfeld's series, Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. That's the nearest thing we get now to a Tarantino Avery dialogue scene, where literally they're just talking and talking and talking, and they could just go on and on and on, and nothing's happening at all. In Pulp Fiction, interestingly, he cranked that up by making the Jackson Travolta characters talk and then go straight into a violent scene. That was the thing that kind of shocked and freaked everyone out and excited everyone. That you would have a long kind of pop culture scene. As I say, it's very 90s. In a way, I think I'm a kind of child of the 90s. That Tarantino was, in a way, he kind of invented the 90s, and there were so many things in the 90s that we kind of we absorbed and we thought could be transferred to almost everything else, like journalism, fiction, restaurants, everything. We were sort of thought were cool because Quentin Tarantino might have had something to do with it.
I think in some way, it feels like Tarantino actually invented nostalgia through his movies. Oh
yeah, it was sort of beyond nostalgia. I mean, he made you feel nostalgia for things that you don't remember, you never heard of. I mean, right. He especially Asian movies. Again, he was in the kind of forefront of knowing about it. And now, after Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, he's kind of in the forefront of people remembering B-level TV shows, B-level kind of westerns and TV shows, which again, the number of people that really do know them are nothing at all. But he must I don't know, he must have another 6 hours available on top of the 24 hours a day just to absorb this material. It's amazing. I mean, I thought I watched a lot of movies, but I had nothing to do with it.
So Peter, you tell me this, Pulp Fiction won the Palme d'Or, and at that time it was a big thing for a Hollywood film. And then it lost to Forrest Gump in the best film at the Oscars. So what do you think? Forrest Gump versus Pulp Fiction, what would be your vote?
I would go. I don't despise Forrest Gump. I kind of like Forrest Gump. I don't hate Forrest Gump in the way that some people do. In a way, the success of Pulp Fiction was in a way indicative of how Europeans saw American cinema. I mean, everybody was electrified by it, and at the time it was indicative of the way Cannes was maybe a little bit bored with the torpor of high art house movie making. It was considered interesting that in 1994 Pulp Fiction defeated Kieslowski's Three Colors Red. I mean, that was like a symbolic moment that Tarantino made Kieslowski look a little bit kind of worthy. People were sitting around nodding and slightly dozing off in Kieslowski movies when they kind of in their hearts of hearts wanted to be freaked out by something, which they duly were. But Hollywood was less, the Academy Awards, that they were never going to like it. They certainly weren't going to like it for Best Picture. That was all. The Forrest Gump was pressing the buttons that Tarantino wasn't going to press. But I don't know. I've never asked him about what he thinks of what he thinks of Forrest Gump. I've got a feeling he probably likes it. I mean, he probably, if you asked Tarantino what he thinks of Forrest Gump, he would probably, my guess is he'd probably not only adore it, but tell you loads of interesting things about it that he admires. I mean, I quite like Tom Hanks in it. The thing about it, if you sit down to watch it now, it kind of goes on a bit long.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, it does.
And like a lot of movies that you watched when you were a kid and you sit down, it doesn't seem the way it is and you remember it. And I actually watched Forrest Gump reasonably recently, and I remember thinking, Christ, this really is going a long time. This movie goes on and on and on with lots of different kind of Zelig style stuff about periods of the American history that Forrest turns up in. But it's Forrest Gump is the classic middlebrow movie that actually isn't as bad as it's not as bad as everybody says. I think that there are a lot of middlebrow films which everybody hates, which maybe aren't quite as bad as everybody says.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of writing, like I have the same problem with Forrest Gump as I have with Slumdog Millionaire. It was so convenient. Everything was following the linear narrative as the discussion they were happening. And therein, like Pulp Fiction was totally opposite to that linear structure.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about it is if it was a novelist doing that, your attitude to the novelist would be, this person must be a very, very serious, upscale kind of college graduate figure who has studied the works of Joyce and Ezra Pound and the works of high European modernism. Whereas when Tarantino did it, he kind of didn't look clever. And a lot of people were, back in the early 90s, people were resistant, mainly because they couldn't believe that Quentin Tarantino was clever, because he kind of had this, and it was part of his shtick, his image, was that he was not clever. He was this kid who worked in a video store and just spent all the time kind of hoovering up this stuff, and it wasn't clever. And of course, he was extremely clever, but his attitude was completely different from the world, the cultural, the middlebrow, upper middlebrow world of culture in literature, which is, wow, how fascinating. You've rejected narrative. Wow. That is what a classy and clever thing for you to have done. That's the reaction if you were reading it in a novel. But if you're watching it in the movies, especially if you're watching Tarantino, who does this and yet crashes around like a bull in a china shop. He is quite an enigmatic figure in a way, because he is a bit Forrest Gump like himself in a way. He will kind of talk to you and say, "Yeah, isn't it great? Yeah."
It kind of disarms you. I feel like his disarming feeling.
Bigger, because he he behaves with you like a fan who is unaware of all the technique that he must have amassed. I mean, he must be very, very different. And we know that he is very different because, you know, apart from everything else, I mean, Uma Thurman is extremely upset by the way she was treated by him. That's sort of the dark side of Tarantino, I suppose. But he's certainly an enigmatic character in that I mean, I've never watched any documentary which shows him at work, shows him directing anybody. I mean, I suppose there must be. But
Arnab, I want you to talk about one Tarantino movie, and it shouldn't be Inglourious Basterds, okay? So pick another one.
No, okay.
Oh, man, I had so many things to say about Inglourious Bastard.
You can say lots of things about Inglourious, but there's probably, I mean, I'm probably wrong. But Inglourious Basterds is probably.
No, I'm just kidding. You can.
I know. I got it. Like, yeah, I was thinking like where to start from. Like, first thing is first. Like, you were right when you said that if someone says Jackie Brown, he's not a Tarantino fan. I was telling that to Arup because I have watched most of the Tarantino movies more than 3-4 times, and Jackie Brown is probably one of the only few movies which I've watched only once, way back, and I don't think I want to revisit it again. But
I mean, I mean, I'm not, and I don't want to revisit it. I'm sure it's very good, but it's kind of atypical. In a way, it's sort of straight. As I say, it's for the straights, the non-fans. The non-fans don't really like it. It's like, I don't know. It's like saying you're a Beatles fan and your favorite track is "When I'm 64." Really. It's like saying it's like saying I don't know. That's what it's like for me. But there are some really interesting. I mean, a movie which I found really interesting, almost novelistic, is The Hateful Eight. Mm-hmm. Again, it's so static and so mysterious, and incidentally, it's got one of those great. It's got a great track. It's got a great soundtrack, great musical score by Morricone. It's one of the greatest. Again, it's a difficult movie because it's almost a stage play or something. It's so static, and yet I found it absolutely fascinating because of its. Because of the sheer claustrophobic compression of the hostility between everybody. As I say, nobody. Again, it's a difficult thing to bring off the sheer compression and suppressed violence that's about to happen. As I say, I can't think of any other filmmaker who can get away with doing it. I'm not sure that The Hateful Eight is his greatest film by any means, but it's a fascinating movie.
Would you consider it to be a little underrated, Peter, Hateful Eight, or do you think it is?
The Hateful Eight is underrated. Yeah. I thought The Hateful Eight was terrific. I must call up what I read about it. I can't remember, but I thought it was kind of great. As I say, it's a movie which defeats your expectations of action adventure. Character interrelationship and the surmounting of obstacles, all those things. In a way, it's a classic Tarantino because it has the Tarantino form, which are these very monolithic chapter headings. I mean, as I say, most screenwriters are taught in their early 20s to follow the screenwriting principles of someone like Robert McKee or Sid Field, which is a movie script follows the 3-act structure. Basically, 1, 2, 3. Whereas Tarantino's films just don't do that at all. They can have 8.5 chapters, clunk, clunk, at chapter 3, clunk, clunk, and then you think, where are we going with this? Blah, 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 blah. And you think, in a way, as structurally challenging as the dazzling point of view shifts of his earlier movies is very distinctive, almost eccentric insistence on this kind of Charles Dickens, chapter 3, chapter 4. It's so strange because it also, interestingly, slows the pace down. You think, oh, someone like Tarantino, a kind of movie brat, everything is going to be fast, 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 fast. Not at all. Things can slow down like a kind of aircraft carrier. It kind of slows way down. And that's part of the fascination of it.
Right. Arup, you wanted to add something about Hateful Eight?
Yeah, I actually love Hateful Eight. It might not have that kind of a repeat viewing value like the other films. Like, I will not watch it today and then watch it next month again. But I feel that it is one of his most politically loaded films. Like, his other films are more wishfulness in terms of the political undertones. Here we actually see he talks about the America that was never there and that we always talk about, but it was not. I remember that last scene where Samuel Jackson's character, he and this other guy, they are in the all with blood around them, and they have been always fighting each other, and they have now teamed up and killed the others, and they are reading that forged letter where it's kind of reading about Lincoln, about America, which has never been the case. So that kind of the satire in the whole thing, and the continuously the undertones which goes on in each of those characters, that's very unique, which is a bit different from the other Tarantino films. They're much more on the face, which Hateful Eight isn't.
Yeah. It's when the violence happens in the Hateful Eight, it is as shocking as anything else. The violence with Jennifer Jason Leigh, I find very shocking. It's as shocking as the ending of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood to be. It is very violent and unpleasant, and I guess the word is gonzo. It's kind of crazy gonzo. Then that Tarantino will not let it go without some sort of violent flourish. He won't let it go at all. But as I say, for its kind of intimacy, its unexpected, almost paradoxical intimacy and confrontational proximity, the Hateful Eight is still very, very gripping.
Mm-hmm. Just while we talk about this violence part, we are also a big fan of Park Chan-wook. We actually had a podcast on him, the last one, Old Boy and the Vengeance trilogy and all of that. So do you think, there's some induction, there's some influence on each other, Park and Tarantino?
Oh yeah, I would say so. I mean, I think the big landscape shot fight scene in Old Boy, I don't know if you know what I mean. I'm not describing it very well.
The corridor scene.
Yeah, the corridor scene, which sort of goes on. That is, to me, that is a scene that couldn't have existed without Tarantino. It's my favorite. I would say Old Boy's possibly my favorite part. I don't know, but it's certainly the most stylized, violent movie. Yeah.
I think it's we cannot talk about Tarantino without talking about Kill Bill movies, Kill Bill Volume 1 and Kill Bill Volume 2. So Arnav, let me get to you, and could you talk a little bit about what do you like about Kill Bill, or whether you don't like it? What are your views on it?
No, don't like. There can't be anything. Anyone who is a Tarantino fan and will not like Kill Bill, and it's a good continuation from that corridor scene from Old Boy, because that is inspired from Tarantino. And Tarantino has openly said that he is inspired from other Korean films. And in talking about that inspiration and all, whenever I think of Kill Bill, that whole sequence in Kill Bill 1, and where the whole choreographed killing happens, I am reminded of that. I often watched it just like that. The way when you see that the bride, Uma Thurman, is plucking the eye from one of the henchmen, and then suddenly the color turns into black and white. And then the whole sequence happened in black and white. That it never felt violent. It felt so well choreographed. Even I'm not seeing that blood, the pure red form. It's so well choreographed, and then again in transitions into a pool of blood. The water at the initial start scene, it was all plain water, and then it's all red. So this magic of creating a choreography out of violence. This is something that attracted me to Kill Bill.
Yeah,
and obviously,
I tell you what I'm trying to do right now. I'm trying to find the photograph I took of myself in the original Tokyo restaurant. Where is it?
Is it?
This is what I'm doing right now. I'm sorry to be. If I can find it, maybe I can. Oh yeah, here it is. The House of Blue Leaves restaurant is that's me there.
Yes. Okay.
The House of Blue. It's not called the House of Blue Leaves. It's called Gonpachi. But there we are. I love Kill Bill for its choreography, its balletic strangeness. I love David Carradine in it, actually. I think I love him because, again, it's a very cool thing to do, to cast him. Because all Bruce Lee fans know to sort of despise him because he got the job in the Kung Fu TV show and not Bruce Lee. And of course, it's a killer kind of joke, kind of pop culture twist for Tarantino to have found David Carradine and made him the star of it. And, if you're a fan of those lost TV kind of worlds, it's great that he's found him to do that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So I thought it was great, but it's very shocking because it's about rape. It's about rape revenge.
Right.
And again, that is a very well understood genre in the movies, of course. But it's some of the scenes in it at the beginning, especially her getting shot in the head and surviving, being raped while unconscious. And there are some people who loathe those sorts of scenes, and I get that. But Tarantino, as I say, he does it with sheer gonzo lack of middlebrow good taste that he kind of gets away with it. I mean, it's like kind of primitive art, what the French called art brut, primitive, strange, mad art. And that's what, to me, Kill Bill is.
I think Kill Bill is also, I really enjoy Kill Bill because it is something which gives us a reason to go to cinema and enjoy. Yeah. It's like a celebration with everything, with the drama, the music, the performances, plus the subtext and the emotions it can bring through. It's truly wonderful. And then he pushes you. Tarantino literally pushes you, and he says, "I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do." Yeah. And now it is, I am gonna make you feel the way I want you to make a feel. That scene Arnab was talking about when she was fighting the crazy idiot. I think they were called the crazy idiot. Something like that. And then suddenly she goes to the upper level of the restaurant, and then she goes to fight with the character of Lucy Liu. I forgot the name of the character. Yeah. And it's all serene white. Suddenly it transforms into a samurai movie.
It's amazing.
It's the way he could do
because
it.
It's the kind of cinema which is there to make you feel something different. Because so many movies are there to slide straight through you like a kind of processed snack. You kind of don't even know that you've eaten it. Whereas his kind of cinema is there to detonate a kind of feeling inside you. Now that feeling might be revulsion. It might be objection. It might be a profound estrangement from what it is that you've decided to do. You've decided to go to the movies, and how are you rewarded? How does Tarantino reward you? By giving you an unpleasant evening that you wished you hadn't had. Or, at any rate, he gambles on that. You gamble, that's what's going to happen. Or you gamble, you will avoid it. Mm-hmm. But he does this. And I'm always reminded of, I think it was Franz Kafka who says that literature has got to be an axe which breaks the frozen ice and releases the water underneath. And in a way, it sounds like a pretentious thing to say, but in a way, that's what Tarantino is doing. His films aren't there to reassure you and to smooth a path from how you feel at the beginning to how you feel at the end. He's there to detonate a kind of cherry bomb that he's lobbed into your lap. And there are very few directors who really want to do that. I mean, even Scorsese, in a way, doesn't quite want to do that. Mm-hmm. I would say another director who wants to do it, or used to want to do it, is Michael Haneke, the Austrian director who wants to upset you. You are not here to enjoy yourself. You're here to accidentally get cut on broken glass. That is what you're here to do. And of course, understandably, quite a few people don't want that. They don't want that.
And you also rightly pointed out when you said like the few people might not like the first sequence of the Kill Bill, like getting raped and all the gory stuffs. And then again, you mentioned about that how Tarantino, it's like a detonator of a bomb sitting under your lap, and he wants the audience to get excited from the very first scene, like be it like the Kill Bill, the first sequence, or the Inglourious Bastard first sequence. It's like the revenge is the purest form of emotion, and we kind of got part of the revenge. And who, like, when the Kill Bill Part 1 ends to the climax, it was really nice seeing the bride beating the ass out of everyone. Similarly, who would have not, like, majority of, like, someone like me, have loved to see the Hitler and the whole Nazi army getting burned alive on a theater. I mean, that was a pleasure to us.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. Although, as I say, it was tempered for me in thinking that I didn't quite, because Hitler was a real person, and what happened was something slightly different from that. I mean, I get that it's a revenge thing, and it came from a place of that. In a way, it came from an impeccable place that we all could agree with, and yet, in a way, I think Tarantino is more powerful, more potent, more subversive when he's doing something that you kind of don't agree with. That he's doing something that is just violent and mad for no reason, that cannot be justified in liberal humanist terms, in a way that arguably the outcome of Inglourious Basterds can be. Yeah, I mean, Kill Bill, both chapters are good for me.
So I think, again, another influence that we have seen, violence and the way Tarantino filmmaking goes. Again, you were mentioning about Gangs of Wasseypur. So Anurag Kashyap, the director of Gangs of Wasseypur, he is a self-proclaimed big Tarantino fan, and he kind of tells that I have a lot of influence. So when you watched Gangs of Wasseypur or any other movies of Kashyap, do you see any kind of a Tarantino influence?
I think so. Yeah, it's been a while since I've watched it, to be honest with you. But yes, in a certain sense, with that, I would. Yeah, I mean, I would say certainly a Western or Hollywood influence, perhaps more specific, not quite as specifically a Tarantino influence, but certainly the idea of I mean, you could say that the influence of Tarantino is especially in that idea of being part 1, part 2. In a way, that's where the Tarantino influence comes. But I would say kind of perhaps more with Scorsese in some ways. I don't know.
So a big fan of Scorsese. Yes.
But the idea of a kind of gangster epic, the idea that it's not merely a gangster operation, but a gangster scenario elevated to the idea, almost a Shakespearean thing of it being an epic that goes on and on, almost generationally. I think that's something that's more Hollywood. But I probably associate more broadly with Hollywood.
Another thing, Peter, that we wanted to discuss, Tarantino movies is all about this ensemble cast. I mean, he will have, these big stars, facing off with each other, and then this, great cameos. I mean, his films are known for their cameos, and at the end of, the fag end of the film, there will be a new character who will come, and there will be some lines. So, how do you think, he's so good at managing the ensemble casts?
Yeah, I think he did it from the word go. As I say, he was very good at gathering together people who you wouldn't expect to be. And for example, I mean, in Reservoir Dogs, Mr. Blue was, again, it's a kind of a pop culture kind of grace note. Was his casting for Mr. Blue was Ed Bunker, who was a Pulp Fiction crime novelist, and in fact went on to write a very good crime novel called Dog Eat Dog, which was then adapted by Paul Schrader. A very good film, actually. So Tarantino has always been a brilliant kind of curator of big casts, and in a way that's outside of the mainstream, because classic Hollywood cinema really only allows for 3 characters, really. Leading man, leading woman, other supporting cast. I mean, they're really armor. Whereas he can bring in lots of characters without it being a kind of huge ensemble cast. That's the point. I mean, there are ensemble movies like the ones directed by Robert Altman, and they are ensemble casts, huge number, with everybody getting a small amount too. Or you have a movie like Murder on the Orient Express, where you have a huge amount of cast. But Tarantino casts are sort of different, as you say. They're more rangy and kind of unruly. You have all these sort of people kind of ranging around, and some of them are big names who will be doing very little. Like, for example, in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, there's a great little role for Al Pacino playing the agent. It's great. It's a really funny role. It's almost, I don't know how to describe it really. It's not really a cameo because it's not presented to as a cameo. It's just a small role, and he just kind of comes on and does his thing, and it's really good.
Like, what was
I still cannot believe of Robert De Niro in Jackie Brown. He's always there sitting on the sofa and watching television.
But that's great. I love that about Jackie Brown, is that actually it's a good way of using Robert De Niro, because there are lots of, as you know, there are lots of very bad ways, whereas that's a very good way of using it.
No, since you mentioned about like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, what was your experience of watching that movie for the first time? I mean, like when the film moved towards the slowly moved towards the climax, we all know that what was the reality. But when the climax dawned onto you, what Tarantino has done with the story, what was your first reaction?
I thought it was absolutely great. It was a very big Cannes Film Festival event. I would have loved to have seen Pulp Fiction, incidentally, but it's the first showing in Cannes, because seeing a film in Cannes is so great because nobody's seen the film yet. That's the great thing about seeing it in Cannes. You're watching it for the very first time. Nobody's seen it. Nobody's written any articles about it. Nobody's tipped you the wink about exactly what's going to happen. Everything is new about it. It's sort of amazing. And it was a real Cannes event, that thing. But yeah, it kind of crept along, and you think, my God, what's going to happen now? And you'd almost forgotten that it was about Charles Manson. Because you are so immersed in this new alternative reality, it almost didn't occur to me to think, wait, that's not what's going to happen, is it? Is something else going to... It was only when I kind of tripped over the ending, I realized, oh no, of course that's not what happens, is it? I was so involved in it. I was so encased in this alternative world that it stopped me from being ironic in a way. It stopped me from thinking, oh, I get it. It's different. It's all different. Okay, I understand. In a way, I was so, the imaginary characters of Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt, their characters were so kind of vivid that it didn't occur to me to think about Polanski. I mean, Roman Polanski does appear in the film as this imaginary version of Roman Polanski, or Charles Manson, or any of the girls.
So I have a very difficult question for you now, Peter. With this question, we will end this sequence and move to the next one. So we see in Kill Bill that Uma Thurman wears the yellow suit, and that reminds us of Bruce Lee, obviously.
Oh yeah.
And then we come to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and we see Brad Pitt kicking Bruce Lee in that scene.
Yeah, I mean.
So what is the relationship between Tarantino and Bruce Lee? Does he love him or hate him? That's what we want to know.
I think he loves him. I think there was a kind of slightly bogus debate, a kind of identity politics debate about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood that a lot of people, East Asian critics, were saying that it was offensive to have this comedy version of Bruce Lee not only fighting but getting beaten. I mean,
getting his ass
I think that's part of the joke. I don't believe for a moment Bruce Lee could have got defeated by somebody almost 25 years his senior, however much of a tough guy he was. No way would Bruce Lee go down to Brad Pitt. No way on earth. That's sort of the joke, I think.
Right.
The idea that Bruce Lee, that this character played by Bruce could defeat Bruce Lee in a martial arts contest. No way. But that is a deliberate part of the effect, I think. But you're right. I mean, it is weird that Kill Bill had this very oblique, subtle, almost illusory kind of ghost of Bruce Lee, and then Once Upon a Time in Hollywood actually brings him back to light with this. But I'm sorry to say I've forgotten the name of the actor who plays him. I thought he played him very well.
Yes.
Very studied, but I think very fundamentally respectful impersonation of Bruce Lee. I don't think it was anybody's intention, and certainly I can't believe it was Tarantino's intention to mock or to denigrate Bruce Lee in any way. I don't think so at all. But I think the idea of Bruce Lee losing a fight to Brad Pitt is the joke. I mean, but a lot of people, I get it. They didn't like the idea, and they thought that
that was his way of warming up us for the alternate reality. Exactly. Which was coming.
Exactly, it's just absurd. Bruce Lee is this kind of smirking tough guy. Not that we're supposed to think that Brad Pitt is out of condition or that he couldn't fight, because of course, he is in great shape for a guy his age. I say a guy his age, he's about my age. I wish I looked like him. I wish I looked like him 20 years ago. Never mind, I don't know now, but yeah, I think you're right. It is odd that those are two totally different ways of alluding to kind of the tissue, the material of pulp, the pulp fiction or the pulp movies, to have him, the ghost of Bruce Lee, or the kind of image of Bruce Lee kind of flitting like a ghost across the screen in Kill Bill, and to have him just in real life appear. It is odd. I mean, I agree. It's a strange new slant, but I mean, I love the fight scene in Hollywood because it's so outrageous, and so you after a while you watch it and you are nervous. You think, guys, you've got to make a movie. This is ridiculous. You can't fight and break and crash into that guy's Rolls Royce as well. It's so horrible. I love it because it's so funny. You think I feel kind of stressed thinking, guys, on a movie set, time is money, and you can't fight while you're waiting for the next setup. This is ridiculous. I remember watching that movie and being quite stressed, thinking, Jesus, how much money is this going to cost the production of Bruce Lee and Brad Pitt fighting? This is ridiculous.
Right. Talking about that, Peter, let's talk about, if you have to pick one favorite scene of Quentin Tarantino's excellent, par excellence work, what would that be?
Oh goodness, it's so hard. I think I would. From Pulp Fiction, I think I would do maybe John Travolta going to the bathroom and leaving his gun outside and coming outside. That sort of moment where he comes out and Bruce Willis is there, and John Travolta realizes, shit, I'm going to get killed now. That kind of, oh my God, I can't believe it. I went to the toilet to take a shit, and now I'm going to get killed. And he did that the way Tarantino holds that moment to say, now he's going to get killed, and yet he's not terrified. It's just a kind of, damn, I can't believe I did that. Bang, and he gets killed. And it sort of meshes in comic and dramatic terms with the fact that he's somehow not dead, because he comes back. We're going to get another scene from earlier when he's still alive, and he ends the whole movie alive, and you forget that he's dead. It's it's one of the most extraordinary achievements, I think. In a way, that's sort of my favorite.
Yeah. I feel like you want to say another scene. Is it? Do you want to say another?
I mean, there are loads of things. I would say from Reservoir Dogs, the initial discussion of Like a Virgin, still very funny. I would say from Kill Bill, David Carradine dying on the fifth step. Very good. You find yourself counting the steps and thinking,
right.
Yeah.
Adam, let me ask you, what is your favorite Quentin Tarantino?
Come to me last, because I have so many scenes. I don't want to hijack the whole discussion.
All right.
All right. I'll come to Arup.
Yeah. I think that final face-off between Uma Thurman and David Carradine, I love that.
Yeah.
And Uma is like all loaded. Now it's the time finally to kill Bill, and she comes and sees this little daughter of her. And I suddenly get a different subtext to the film. Like, for a woman, the strongest weapon against a woman would be her motherhood, or her baby. And the way Bill is having that final trump card up his sleeve, and he puts the baby in front of Uma, and the whole sequence goes in a very different way. As I was telling, it's like a musical. You are expecting a bomb. Suddenly it takes an emotional route. And then, when they're talking as well, I think David Carradine was talking about Superman, Clark Kent, all those analogies. It feels like two people who were in love with each other at some point of time. And today, one has to kill the other to leave. And yet there is certain sense of, those previous emotions suddenly coming out and then going out, and then she kills him. So this whole sequence, the way it, comes, I loved it. I think it's a brilliant one.
Yeah,
Right.
no, I agree.
Arnav, now you can go.
So yeah, so like again the tickling bomb thing. I was thinking of many other scenes. Suddenly, that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the climax came to my mind because of the alternate reality, and I was telling them that I have a personal anecdote to it as well. My wife was 8 months pregnant, and we both wanted to see that movie on theater, but since she was pregnant and we knew about the actual reality, like, okay, we said, no, probably this is not the right time to watch the movie. And I was like, oh man, this is the reality. The whole sequence, the way it was built up, it was so brilliant. And like I just mentioned two other scenes. One is from the French pub scene from the Inglorious Bastard. That was so well written. The way the discussion suddenly boiled up to, we could understand there is something tickling. It's like the lull before the thunderstorm. The whole sequence where Vincent Jules talks about that Bible, that text from the Bible, which again was imaginary. Most of them, the last two lines were actually there in the Bible. And then he talks about Kahuna Bagar while killing those guys. I mean, that's so when I'm telling it, it might not sound that interesting or cinematic, but like it's so well written.
Oh, it's certainly sounding well cinematic the way you're describing it to me. Yes, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, it's an amazing scene. It's an amazing scene. Again, it was the movie that introduced us all to Samuel L. Jackson. It was the movie that made a star of him. It's the movie that we realized, we'd seen him in a lot of movies before that. He'd been in bit parts in, I think he was in Jurassic Park.
Yes.
Movies in, but it was the movie that showed you, look, this is what this guy can do. And he's a sensational actor. I mean, he's like a legend. And he made you think, where has he been? He was there all along. It was this guy, not simply Travolta, who we'd already known whose career was being revived. And again, he was really good in it. And again, in ways that we kind of were taken back by. But Samuel Jackson was this legend. We suddenly realized, oh, he's a legend. He's a legend that's been here all along. He just was given this amazing scene to do.
Right.
Some of the funniest moments of dark comedy came from him only. Those dry humor in Pulp Fiction.
No, he's a superstar.
Peter,
what's your scene, Shubhadeep? What's your favorite scene?
Yeah, and I would like to ask what Peter thinks about that scene. It's like, because I'm going to talk about a scene from Pulp Fiction, and it's about the golden clock scene. If you remember the gold clock scene when Christopher, I think Walken comes in, talks to, I think, the child actor,
young Butch.
Young Butch, and he says all that story of putting that clock up his ass for 2 generations.
It was so horrible. You watch it and you think, wow, I remember, the Deer Hunter, and now it's kind of turned into a kind of nightmare right in front of it. And so I think, what on earth has happened? We've suddenly back into the world of Vietnam. How has this happened? Suddenly, Christopher Walken comes in, who sells you that scene. He's, as I say, he's like classic kind of one shot. Walken, he's sort of disturbing and disquieting in a way that only he can be. He sells you that bizarre moment as he tells you about this sort of watch scene, and he, within a few minutes, he tells you so much about how messed up Butch is in his entire adult life. Is this horrible moment where Christopher Walken's coming to tell them there's this horrible thing about his dad.
Right, and you buy it. It's
You buy it.
It's so weird. You buy it.
Yeah, you totally buy it. I mean, you buy it. You think you buy everything else. So this comes with it. You think, oh, I'm gonna buy this as well. But it is weird because it's a flashback that takes you out of the present tense of. I mean, Pulp Fiction shuffles the storyline around, but there isn't much in the way of a flashback which takes you to somebody's childhood. That is quite odd. And again, it unbalances. Another type of screenwriter would want 3 or 4 other big flashback scenes to balance it out in the fabric of the screenplay. Whereas Tarantino has no such scruples. He just clunks this huge flashback in and then clunks it back out, and we're back in the present tense.
Right.
But it's a great short cameo for Walken.
And thanks for the Deer Hunter reference. I totally forgot that.
Yeah, because that's what you associate with. I mean, that's the cultural baggage he brought. I mean, when I saw it, I sort of thought, is this a scene from The Deer Hunter that I missed? You know, because he looks the way he, because in 1994 he almost looks the way he did. I mean, now time has gone by, and of course Christopher Walken doesn't look like that anymore. But it's amazing how, I mean, he still looked like a kind of handsome kind of leading man in a way. He could still carry that off.
Yeah, I think we are towards the end of our discussion today. Peter, you're a really warm person, and
thank you.
and what we have achieved in this 2 hours, 1.5 hours, we'll remember for a long time. Thank you so much for what you have done.
Thank you very much for having me, guys. I've really enjoyed myself. I'm sorry my voice has gone. I'm shouting my nonsensical opinions so much. I've turned myself hoarse, but thank you. I've really enjoyed myself.